So I always had this deep sense of, sort of meaning and purpose behind, well, I've come back, so I need to figure out why. And that has kept me going through so many difficult periods of my life.
So, welcome to Unleashed Learning TV and Unleashed Learning Radio for our podcast listeners. Welcome back. Now, as a school leader, you might be feeling like you can't keep up and more is expected of you, and you might be working to advance teaching and learning across your school, but other priorities take up all this space. I just want to let you know there's nothing wrong with you or your team if you're feeling overwhelmed. It's because we're living in a new era I call the era of overwhelm. And to help you stay resilient in this new era, we've got Janine Shepherd on today's show. So, from elite athlete to paraplegic to pilot, Janine Shepherd's story is one of really radical transformation. After a life-changing accident, Janine rebuilt not just her body, but her entire sense of self, becoming a living, flying embodiment of what's possible when we dare to rise. Now, you might have read her books, you might have seen her TEDx talk, you might have seen her on Australia's 60 Minutes. This episode is for you to help you see how to stay resilient in the era of overwhelm. Here we go. So, Janine, welcome to Unleashed Learning TV. I'm super excited you're here.
I am too, and we've had this long conversation. We need to catch up now.
So, as I was talking to you before, we're living in this era. I call it the era of overwhelm. My new book's all about this. And for school leaders that are working to advance teaching and learning, like they really care about teaching and learning excellence getting across the school, this era can really cause people, we were talking about earlier, lose meaning and purpose because you can feel like you're never getting there, you can't keep up, you can start doubting what you're doing. And I really wanted to do an episode about how to stay resilient in this era of overwhelm. And then we've spoken a few times, and then of course I got to read your book, which I just finished. And I thought that your story, there's so much in there that I think we all could draw upon for the time we're living in and for thinking about resilience. So, with that said, could you tell us a little bit? You were this elite athlete. I mean, I can't even believe the stuff that you did. Could you tell us a bit about your life before the accident that you experienced?
Well, I'd always been an athlete. I always say that I started my athletic career at the age of 6 or 7 with little athletics, and it was who I was. I mean, I navigated the world through my body, and did a lot of sports, did track and field, did triathlons, and found myself in cross country skiing, which was, the ultimate endurance sport. And I was in the Australian ski team, and I was on track to represent Australia at the '88 Winter Olympics in Calgary. So I was on top of the world. I'd been invited to train with the Canadian ski team in the lead up to the Olympics, and yeah, my goal was to really put Australia on the map as a force to be reckoned with, and to show the world that this little Aussie could ski and we can be the best in the world.
And then there was a day in the Blue Mountains. Now, for people who maybe haven't read your book, or I know you've been on 60 Minutes and you've shared your story, there was a day in the Blue Mountains that you're on your bike, and I'm kind of getting emotional because I read the book and just finished it.
Mm.
Can you tell folks what happened that day, if that's comfortable for you? I don't want.
Yeah, yeah, of course. I was on a training bike ride with my fellow teammates, and of course, I don't remember the accident, but I was about we'd been riding for about 6 hours, and we were probably half an hour from our destination when I was on a hill, off up off on my bike, and I was hit by a speeding utility truck, and that's the moment, I guess, that changed everything in my life. I was taken by ambulance to the local hospital and flown by the Westpac Rescue helicopter to a large spinal unit in Sydney, and I had extensive and life-threatening injuries. Um, the broken bones are one thing, but really it was the massive blood loss. In the helicopter, they thought that she's not going to survive the helicopter flight from the Blue Mountains to Sydney. I lost 5 liters of blood. My blood pressure was 40 over nothing. Um, and yeah, I tell people I had a death experience, not a near death experience. I did leave my body, and for about 10 days, I was in and out of my body. It was it's hard to explain to people what it was like, but my body was taken to the spinal unit at Prince Henry Hospital. I had broken my neck and my back in 6 places, 5 ribs, my arm, head injuries, internal injuries, of course, massive blood loss. And my parents were there by my bed, and the doctors told my parents, there's nothing else we can do. You more or less need to say goodbye. And I just remember it was this incredible experience of awareness of sort of looking down at my body and really having this awareness of, well, I don't want to go back. I don't want to return to my body because that body's broken. It can no longer serve me. And I really think that the lifeline at the time was my parents sitting by my bed and everyone outside the hospital and people praying for me and people willing me to stay in my body. And I did. And after, on day 10, actually, I sort of opened my eyes and I was back in my body.
When I'm just because I just finished reading the book, so I feel like you wrote that really. I felt like I was there in my own way reading that. One thing I was thinking about as I read that about, which just seems obvious, but I kept thinking as I read, God, how we need everybody. We're not these individuals. We are, but that community that was like love and action. I just thought as I read that part, I want to know when it was really difficult. So, I mean, I don't know. We could speak a lot of times it was difficult because you explain it. What I wanted to ask is, what did you draw upon
Mm.
when it became really difficult? There were times I know in the hospital, then you went home, and then you found out, your athleticism was in question. What were you drawing upon when it got really difficult?
Yeah. Well, in the beginning, it was, the only thing I knew was what I knew as an athlete, the determination, the discipline, the athlete's mindset. And that's sort of how I threw myself into everything. And of course, I had the love of my family, incredible power of imagination. I used to lie in my bed and imagine myself walking and imagining myself, getting my life back together again. And I just always had this belief that, well, that I'd return to my body for a reason. I felt like I chose to come back to my body because that's one of the, without going into too much detail, but one of the messages that I had while I was out of my body was that I get to choose. Do I go back to my body? You don't have to go back to your body. And I did. So I always had this deep sense of, sort of meaning and purpose behind, well, I've come back, so I need to figure out why. And that has kept me going through so many difficult periods of my life. And also this sense of, I think the ultimate, we've talked a little bit about my PhD journey at the moment around liminality. And I think that time in hospital was the quintessential liminal space between life and death. And I've lived through so many liminal periods in my life that I've come to understand that these are the times that really matter. During these liminal spaces, this is where the magic really happens, where you get the chance to re-author your life. You're no longer who you were and you haven't yet become. So what do you do in that space? And I've been able to, even now, go back, even though I didn't understand how I did it back then. Now I understand that I've done it in a way that, well, I call it conscious liminality, which is to go in with intention and agency and really reshape and re-author your life during those times.
It makes me think, I'm not plugging a book, but in my book, I talk about partly what happens in the era of overwhelm is people lose meaning and purpose. They can't find it. But I think what you're saying is, it makes me think that sometimes we lose it so we can find maybe a new one or find it differently or find or reconnect to it. That's kind of makes me think about that. I'm not putting words in your mouth, but that's what I'm thinking about is that despair is when the meaning and purpose disappears and you tapped into different levels of meaning and purpose is what I'm hearing.
Absolutely. And it just doesn't end. I mean, I've had to, as I'm getting older with spinal cord injury, because people don't realize, even though I'm walking, I'm actually a paraplegic. I'm a walking paraplegic. So I've had to, um, in the last few years doing my PhD and doing a deep dive into disability and what it means, and looking back, I'm doing it's shape shifted from a mixed method to a autoethnography, where I've really had to look into the choices that I've made and what it means to be a woman with disability, and even explore my own internal ableism and how that's affected me. And um, it's changed who I am. It's changed my outlook on the world and how I navigate my experiences. So all of these, they're all gifts, they're all opportunities, as you know, to go in and get to know ourselves a little bit better.
It makes me think, and I want to ask the next question, but it's almost the choice of meaning making, the choice of, or it makes me think of, I was thinking of another interview I did, but that if everything's a classroom, if
Mm.
everything's a classroom, if I look at everything as a classroom, and what is this teaching me? I remember reading a book that once said, "Don't shoot the messenger; it's all messages." So, well, it goes to the next question because I think actually the meaning and purpose is here from the next question. I want to read it because I want to make sure I ask it correctly. But like I said, in the era of overwhelm, for some of the most driven professionals that really care about what they care about, they can lose meaning and purpose. It's like they can feel like it's just out of their control. The things they care about disappears. They can't keep up. And there were times I'm laughing because I want to say at the very least that you were overwhelmed. Like in the hospital, I felt that when I read the book. And when you went home, I really felt that. Like that's what I was feeling. How did you stay resilient in the face of when it was overwhelming, those moments of overwhelm?
Gosh, and I'm still going through them because, as you know, I'm going through a very difficult stage in my life right now. But, I haven't always felt resilient. You don't have to, feel resilient. I mean, I think one of the, one of, I consider this a strength, is that I'm able to, fall apart and cry into my pillow and just be a mess. I have a funny story, and I'll show you. Actually, I'm going to lean over and grab these right now. Um, Sorry, but these are my little weebles.
Man, oh, they're the ones that go like this.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and my girlfriend, who's in Kyrgyzstan teaching writing right now, she always said, "Oh my gosh, you're a weeble. You wobble, but you never fall down." So I think I give myself permission to wobble. Which is I've got them on my desk here as a reminder. They go back and forward. So I think it's not about staying strong all the time. It's it's about choosing just to show up, to allow yourself to fall apart and know that you'll pick yourself up again. So, and being able to, reframe and not to escape those times. They're the times that are really important. They're the times that you need to be able to, um, create rituals. I mean, I've created, many rituals in my life, and um, one of the very small things I do is I ask myself, WTGIT, what's the gift in this? Like you said, each, everything's a classroom. So I'm always asking, okay, there's going to be a gift in this. What is it? Even if I can't see it now. And, and also asking, what is one small thing? I always tell people, just even if you can't get through, if it's all too overwhelming and there's too much, just what is one small thing I can do today, no matter how small, and then do it.
I think we're also in this driven kind of like perfect, it's all going to be, and that there are times we don't know. There are times we're not resilient. The what's it, Weebly? I
They're the
think
weeble
okay,
wobbles, but it never falls down.
Weeble, in the States we call it Weeble wobbles. That's what they were called. Yeah. So there are times where we do fall apart. We're not feeling resilient. We're not, and allowing those times and the time where we got to have it all figured out, I think is a really helpful thing to hear for so many people. Okay,
And also, I'll just say one of the exercises that I've created is a transformation exercise, which is we look at patterns. We're both fans of Joseph Campbell, and we look at patterns in life, and I see that everything happens. There are patterns that can, repeat. And if we look back at, a difficult time in our life that we've had in the past, and we can somehow draw that strength and what we used during those times into whatever challenge we're having now, we can sort of, grow from that. So one of the exercises I get people to do is to look back at a past challenge and ask what were the things that, helped me then, and then try to translate that and bring that into a current challenge that you've got now. And we just know that you sort of build upon that, and you build your strength from knowing that you've done it before and you can do it again.
You know, my dad just recently passed, and one of the things he said to me when I went through a very difficult time, which speaks to what you said, was he said to me, he was at that point late 70s, because at my age, not that you forget, he goes, either two things: you either forget what the issue was,
Mm.
or you look back and he said many times, I don't want to say all the times, but many times you go, I'm so glad that happened,
Oh,
because what
yeah,
it opened. So he said, he used to say to me, just let things play themselves out. Just
yeah.
let.
I mean, I that's true. I mean, you can look back at something. I often get people to think back to the worst thing that happened, 5, 10 years ago, and they'll often say now, as you said, "Oh, that's the best thing that ever happened to me because, that breakup, I met this partner, or I got this job, or I found myself in this house, or I learnt these incredible, spiritual lessons, or whatever it is." But so that's why you're right. You have to just let things play out, and it takes a sort of sense of radical acceptance often because life is tough.
Well, I think I've got two last questions for you. And this one I really was in the book. I think it's at the end of the book, because again, I finished it this week,
Yeah.
but you quoted Lao, I
Lao
can't,
Tzu.
yeah,
Yeah.
Lao Tzu, yeah. And you said that you used the quote that said, and
Mm.
here you are, this athlete. I kept thinking you were your body. So this isn't light stuff to say, but you
Mm.
said, when I let go of who I am, or he said, when I let go of what I am, I become what I might be.
Mm.
And I was thinking, like I said, about Elizabeth Lesser's, Broken Open, allowing things to. What did you have to let go of, and what did you find out because you did that?
I had to, I had to, I had to let go of the sense that I was my body. That was how I navigated everything in the world. My physical strength, I was this elite athlete. And, losing that was an incredible gift because I realized that I was more than my body. I always think that, the essence of who we are has nothing to do with our physical body. It's that internal life, that spiritual, that the storyteller, the soul, the seeker. I mean, that's who we are. And I think when we attach to things and we think that, we're our body, we're our house, we're our partner, we're our job, we're on a slippery slope, you
I,
know.
I think for this era of overwhelm, and I've felt this in my career sometimes, but if we get so attached that I'm the principal, I'm the leader, I'm the this, and it's not working out, because I shouldn't say working out, but in the era of overwhelm, there's these moments of like, who are you without that? And there's some liberation, not some, a lot of liberation when we find that answer. And that answer might take some time to find, as you described really well in
And
the.
that's why, yeah, that's why athletes have a problem with once their career ends because everything, their whole identity, is connected to who they were as an athlete. And when they lose that, there are that, they get to ask the question, well, if I'm not that, then who am I?
I want to ask the last question, but also want to say you're who you are is a really good writer too. You're a really good writer. I just want to tell you that, or share that. So here's my last question. And I know you speak to lots of leaders. You go on stages, and you're a big public speaker, and you share some of the important lessons that you've learned, especially about being defiant, as you talk about in the book,
Mhm.
other books you read about. Now you're speaking to school leaders right now, leadership teams in this episode. And they're really working to make a difference in a very often very difficult time. And I call it the era of overwhelm. Can you offer any piece of advice in terms of how to stay resilient in this era of overwhelm, or if they're feeling overwhelmed?
Yeah. Well, there's so many things I could say. I mean, I would say firstly that what we need in the world is, that we're all enough. Wherever we are right now is where we're meant to be. And what we need in life is not more perfection. We need more presence. We need people to be present with where they are. And I really believe that, we learn resilience through the people that are around us. So I say to parents, if you want your kids to be more resilient, work on yourself, develop those skills because they're watching you closely. Teachers, leaders, our kids are watching us. So build those skills, build presence, build rituals, help them tell stories and create meaning from that. And, remember that, these liminal spaces that we're in, we're meant to be here. These are great, be there, embrace it, and recognize that, um, these, if we can go in with consciousness and agency, we're going to create the meaning that will give our kids, resilience. And so I say, Bjorn Thomason, who wrote the book, Liminality, the Danish anthropologist and the modern, he says three things. Firstly, awareness, recognize that you're in this difficult space and sit with it. Don't try to escape it. Create symbols, meaning makers, meaning making, rites, and whatever it is, the little things that create that, and then embrace it as a place for creativity. So I say, let go, rise, and begin again. Embrace those times.
You know, at Unleashed Learning, we talk about one of the keys of the system is the key of educator or key leader. And we talk about you teach who you are. You teach who you are, you lead who you are. And so what you're saying, what I hear partly is you want that be it so people can see it too. And also we can do it together. So, you know, the vulnerability you're describing, we could do that together. So
And it's okay to, for teachers out there, it's okay to share those things. Storytelling, as you know, is how we create meaning. So letting them share their stories and know, that we might not be sitting around the fireplace as such, but in the classroom or wherever we are, get these kids to tell their stories and share our stories and share our vulnerabilities.
sorry, I interrupt you. In the book that just comes out, probably be out by the time this is out, but I talk about we learn best in learning sticks in stories, symbols, metaphors, not facts, figures, and numbers. So it's the stories people remember. I think people, I'm going to remember yours because this book really, I thank you for writing it. So we've got rapid fire questions. These are the quick.
Okay.
So, like 30 seconds. Favorite teacher?
Oh gosh, my favorite teacher was my English teacher in high school called Mr. Wasson, and he really reminded me of Robin Williams in Dead Poet Society. I mean, he would come in, jump up on the table and tell these wonderful stories, and I think that really was the beginning of my love of English and writing. And yeah, he's always, stayed with me. Yeah.
Person who, I mean, you've had a learning history, my friend, from everything you've learned. A person who's most impacted your learning history.
Well, I don't know if you call it learning history, but the person that's impacted me the most is the young girl at the time that was next to me in the spinal ward, Maria, who woke up on her 16th birthday after an accident as a quadriplegic, and she had damage to her vocal cords. And what she taught me was she always smiled and she always asked about me, even though she couldn't talk properly. And she gave me what I say the gift of acceptance. And I just thought she was they put me in the bed next to her because they thought it would be good for her, but actually it was good for me.
I read about her in that book. I'm thinking
She was amazing. Yeah.
of all the things you teach, and you're definitely a teacher, my friend. What's one concept or idea you really want to stick for everyone? Something that you think lasts for people.
Well, three simple words, and I talk about this in my keynotes, and it's love the hills.
Mm.
And we go back, we talked about Scott Peck, the road less traveled, life is difficult. Love, he talks about loving the problems. Well, I tell people, love the hills. It doesn't, not the mountains, just the hills, the little things every day. Lean in and recognize that, there's a gift in every hill. So embrace them, learn to love them. That's where the magic happens, when you lean in.
Maybe the opportunity in this era of overwhelm is it's an opportunity for all of us to break open a little bit, to lean in, to really have to think about, not have to, but do some reflective practices right now to kind of get grounded again. So, but with that, I just want to say this,
Thank
what a writer. Thank you for your story. Thank you for being here. Good luck on your PhD and thank you for being here, my friend.
Oh, thank you, William. It's can't wait to catch up with you again in person.
Thanks, Janine.
Thanks.
So, how good was that? I mean, really, I could speak to Janine for hours, and we're actually doing a follow up meeting to talk more. But now it's your turn, and we want to know, what do you do to stay resilient when you're feeling overwhelmed? So jump over to the conversation on our website, and when you're there, if you want to escape overwhelm and find your focus, my new book is out, A New Way Forward for Schools, Advancing Teaching and Learning in the Era of Overwhelm. It's written for the leaders across your school. There's extra freebies when you buy it. We can beat overwhelm and advance teaching and learning for good.